Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to our training. Today's training is being recorded. I do ask that everybody stays on mute. Uh, so today we'll be reviewing our training of part two of our series of bringing light into the darkness, discussing heroic doses. Our first training in this series was on microdoses, which is available on our YouTube channel if you care to see it. The training is being hosted by the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association, and really happy to have our guests here today. My name is Jason Burge, and I'm co-founder and the Chief Business Officer with Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association. And our presenters today will be Amanda Gao. She's the Executive Director of Bendable Therapy, and Lisa Ritter, who is our co-founder and the Chief Clinical Officer. So we at PATA believe this is a field in which both scientific studies and experiential anecdotal data converge, each on different but vital levels to contribute to the collective wisdom. Intentions are very important, and our intentions for this training is really centered around respect. We expect that this is a topic that many people may have different views and feelings about. Part of our intention and efforts are to challenge common views and thoughts to empower individuals to make their own decisions around using substances for mental health. The views being shared today are with the intention to better serve the seeker looking to use psilocybin to address their mental health concerns. While there is no one right way to approach healing through psilocybin, there are wrong ways, and we believe that we should always keep safety as the most important aspect of seeker care. So before we get started, with the main portion of the presentation, I'd like to share some information about Bendable Therapy and the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association. So Bendable Therapy is a nonprofit based out of Bend, Oregon, and they are aligned and work with a service center, but they are independent. And so today, Amanda Gao is the executive director of the nonprofit Bendable Therapy, and we'll be sharing information that she has been learning as part of our experiential. And thank you for being here, Amanda. So the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association is a national nonprofit. We are based out of Oregon. Our mission is to promote the educated and informed use of psilocybin to address the mental health crisis. And so our outcomes are our mental health outcomes. How do we provide services and information for everybody to be educated and empowered in their own decisions, whether or not they choose to use psilocybin or how they would like to use it for mental health. Our primary programs are based around education. We have two sub-programs we're developing: the Psilocybin Facilitators Association, which is advocacy and education for licensed facilitators in regulated states, and a brand new program, the First Responder Collective, which is providing education awareness to current and former first responders so they can address their mental health as well as their departments so that they have accurate information on what's going on in our industry. As I alluded, intentions are super important, and the intentions for the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association and our trainings is that we're geared towards the folks that are experiencing mental health concerns. And we created an intentometer, and on your left, you can see we recognize that psychedelics and psilocybin, could be used in various contexts as long as it's used in a safe and responsible use. We agree with that and promote that. There are different intentions coming into. So folks coming into it a recreational or exploration might have a little intentions with that. Kind of in the middle, that you could have some intentions. It could be spiritual growth. You like community. You're looking for those mystical experiences. You like the ceremonial aspect. And then leaning over into where our focuses really are is for folks that are looking to use psilocybin and psychedelics for a therapeutic use, where it could be anxiety, it could be end of life, it could be existential, dealings with how I was raised within a particular religion, or death and dying, going into more severe cases of treatment-resistant depression, suicidality. And we believe that if we provide the best coverage for folks that have the most to lose, that will then cover everybody else. So our topics today will really be focused on those that are looking for using psilocybin to address a mental health concern. So, thank you. So our objectives today, this is what we plan on running through. All of these questions that will be answered either directly by our presenters or through our Q&A at the end.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a therapist. I'm licensed in Oregon and Washington. I'm in private practice, and I'm a co-founder and clinical director of PATA. And one thing that we like to do is just kind of start because we often have a really mixed audience, just people who are both new, kind of in the field, or pretty immersed in the field. So we just kind of assume maybe a lower common denominator of we just to try to help get all on the same page. So just a little moment to acknowledge where we're coming from is that there's a mental health crisis. So is that something that everybody can agree on? Well, I should hope so, but it's possible no. So there are some, references just to point out. I noted several here. There's also the Kaiser Family Foundation study in 2022 that did reference that about 90% of the people say, and the survey was of about 2,000 people, so a pretty hefty sample, that there is a national mental health crisis. And the study also concluded that even the best performing drugs and instrumental treatments, we have a lot of ways to treat mental health. They show modest efficacy. There's some non-negligible side effects, lots of problems, some relapse rates there that are high, and it just really highlights the need for novel and improved treatments. So psilocybin-assisted therapy being one of them. We could go forward. Just some things to some fun facts here that back in 2020, there was around 90 trials investigating specifically the therapeutic effects of psychedelics between 2010 and 2020. But things have ramped up significantly, and I think there's quite a bit more now. The market is really projected to grow right around 2020. It was a $2 billion industry, projected to grow to 10.75 billion. So we've got some people here who are interested in this field, and it's growing very, very fast. If you're interested in keeping up with some of the decriminalization, it, legalization and all the kind of different levels of deprioritization, those kinds of things. If you wanted to keep track of that and you weren't aware of the psychedelic law tracker, I provided we have the link there for the psychedelic alpha. And it's just kind of helpful too to just talk a little bit because we're the Psilocybin Assisted Therapy Association to talk about what are we really talking about when we say psilocybin assisted therapy? Because a lot of places, as the unique position that we have in Oregon, being the first state in the nation to legalize a program, it can be referred to in ways that aren't quite accurate. Some people refer to it as Oregon's therapy model, psilocybin therapy model. So the use of psilocybin to achieve a therapeutic goal that's a definition that's out there. Another definition that has been around for a while just involves the fact of research. There's been research ongoing since the 50s, 60s, up until the drug war kind of put the kibosh on a lot of it, where psilocybin and therapy were combined, usually in a hospital setting, involved some prep sessions, some dosing sessions, maybe some follow-up sessions, usually having a lot of staff, a lot of really highly qualified staff, medical doctors, psychologists. So that's another way that psilocybin-assisted therapy exists in this world. The we've highlighted the definition that we go by is really incorporating the personal use of psilocybin within the context of mental health therapy with a therapist. So we refer to that often as kind of like bookends. Maybe has a therapist or has an intention to have a therapist. They go to a service center in Oregon or they use psilocybin on their own or with a guide, and then they return to do integration with a therapist. That's the definition that we go by. And there's an even more specific definition, I think, that is, becoming less and less used, but maybe not. Just the process that a therapist, and this is actually something that's coming up in Colorado, as they've become the second state in the nation to legalize a psilocybin program. That a therapist actually there can be a therapist and then also be a facilitator or a licensed guide for at a healing center, and then be present to provide a psilocybin dosing session with their client, and then they could potentially return with their client in therapy to put their therapist hat back on and keep going with integration. Okay, so it's an interesting yellow line, but that'll just be our breakthrough lightning bolt here. We're on the cutting edge. The heroic dose is a term that we'll get a little bit more into, but just the idea of a macrodose, I just wanted to establish that the general rule of thumb is 1 to 2 grams per 50 pounds or about 70 kilograms of body weight. So I pulled this graph from this Frontiers in Psychiatry article, and it talks about the dosing and considerations because there's the dried dried mushrooms that could be weighed in grams, but then there's also the analyte or isolate of mushrooms that correspond. So a standard dose tends to be thought of as around 25 milligrams. That's going to vary a lot. You're going to hear more about that from Amanda in particular. That roughly equates to 2.5 grams. And, we are talking about psilocybin cubensis, Philosophy cubensis. There's different types. There are strains that can vary anywhere from up to 80 times the potency of other strains. So we got to take this with a grain of salt, right? With these grams that these dosages are going to represent very accurately, because we don't know necessarily what strain we're talking about. But in general, a high dose or just kind of the limit of the macrodose would be around 3.5 grams or 35 milligrams of isolate. And then anything above that is going to be more in the heroic range. So you might know, people might know, some people might not, that Terence McKenna, pictured here, is credited with the term heroic dose. He was an explorer. He's actually he went to Berkeley College and majored in art history, and also had an interest in kind of pre-Buddhism, and so it led him to this world of psychedelics. And he, according to him, a heroic dose was about 5 grams of dried psilocybin. But then, that could be depending on who you talk to. So, and depending on the strain. So we're going to go with maybe around 5 grams or something over 3.5 grams. So it's a pretty strong, hefty dose. Terence McKenna had a twofold view. Kind of the main thing I think he might be remembered for is the more mind expansion. I love this quote by him. If the words life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness don't include the right to experiment with your own consciousness, then the Declaration of Independence isn't worth the hemp it was written on. So he was a proponent in the 60s and 70s, which was really in line with a lot of other people other names that we're probably really familiar with, that expansion of the mind is important, and we should have the right to do that. He also believed that it could be helpful in the use of what's sometimes known as psychiatric disorders, or things that have symptoms that are akin to depression, anxiety, addiction, not additions, and trauma, but believe that in those cases there's risk involved. And some other notable people of the time who were involved in the movement, particularly with LSD, like Ken Kesey, one of our local favorites here, who is known to say it's not for every brain. Psychedelics is not for every brain. And Albert Hoffman, illustrious scientist who uh, synthesized LSD and psilocybin, talked about fearing a forbidden transgression of limits, that people could basically just outpace themselves with this. That he mentioned that maybe a more kind of soft place, like a healing, I think he mentioned healing centers would be nice to kind of start so that people could not go too far, basically. And then you've got people like Ram Dass and maybe Timothy Leary, whose main goal was to dose all heads of state around the globe, and with the uh, desire to lead to world peace. So it's all over the place, isn't it? So a heroic dose, it's a large dose. Let's just call it that. Why would somebody do that? So we've got all kinds of people who might be interested, whether they have just heard about it and never had a psychedelic experience before in their life. Maybe they've had one way, way back in a different context, more of an exploratory nature. But in this case, we're talking about people who might be interested in healing for something that is related more to those areas of just mental health, trauma, addiction, anxiety, OCD, eating disorders. And they may have tried everything. So by the time they've gotten to psychedelics, they might just be thinking, just give it to me. Just let's do this thing. I want to make sure I get this done or get better as soon as possible. It's not totally unheard of that more could be better. There's a very recent review of a number of studies that concludes, as you can see, that there is an association between the intensity of the experience, which we would just can infer the intensity of the experience would go up as the dose goes up. Now, is that a direct correlation? Could we draw that on a graph for every person? Not necessarily. So, but there's definitely some information out there that would suggest, that is reliably suggested, that more could lead to some greater improvements. I wanted to talk a little bit about a 2018 study about high dose psilocybin, because it might be something that is referenced, and it could be misinterpreted if say the media or somebody who wasn't totally invested or involved in the particulars would take from this study that more is better. So in this study, it was investigating escalating doses on healthy volunteers. And the way that they described healthy volunteers is that nobody could have a mental health diagnosis. They could also not have a mental health diagnosis in their family. They needed to have one positive experience with psychedelics in their lifetime. It was about split. Most of them were men, most of them were white, and the actual number of participants was only 12. So just to illustrate how this area of studies kind of can be a little daunting, to think about how long this could take to get some more information. 125 people, just fun fact, applied to this study, and rule out. At the end of the day, the 12 ended up finishing the study. So what they found was significant linear dose-related responses on one measure of the mystical experiences scale, which includes 4 domains. So what they concluded is that high doses of psilocybin elicited effects that were at least as strong as lower doses. So obviously, resulting in positive and persisting effects up to 30 days after the initial dose. What they did not find was that, and so they had the combination of a couple of scales that they used. They had a mystical experiences questionnaire and a persisting effects questionnaire. So this was, we have to come up with something to try to standardize what the conclusion can be and the hypothesis is. So these are the two ways that they tried to measure that. And what they were really looking for was that the more, the better, right? The more psilocybin you take, the better the outcomes, the more mystical experiences you had. And what they found is, yes, the more people tended to have the experience of transcendence of time and space. Um, Depending on the person, this could be something, one of your favorite things, or maybe not one of your favorite things to experience. I know it's not always one of my favorite things. But as far as a total mystical experience, so scoring, I think 60% on all of the domains, it was not a prerequisite for positive outcomes. So people did not necessarily need to go up in dosage. I believe let's see, their dosages. The first dose was 21 milligrams. So if you remember, that kind of standard dose was about 25. So they started a little bit lower than that. Dose 2 is 31 milligrams. Dose 3 was about 43 milligrams. And this is based on how much somebody weighs. So per pound or kilogram, it works out to about that. So just to note that there was something about increasing the dose and increasing some effects, but it was not a necessity to have a positive outcome. And another thing about heroic doses, you might, if you're familiar with, say, Johns Hopkins research, they've been doing it for a long time now. Research tends to try to find out what the effects are of a substance. So they're gonna push the envelope at some point. So they tend to use the macrodoses. There's a lot more research on macrodoses than microdoses, and that the heroic dose, depending on, whether you say it's over 3.5 grams or over 5 grams, is going to be used a lot in some research protocols. And the main thing, and I'll just say this last thing and turn it over to Amanda, is why would you use a heroic dose? Well, if you're in Oregon, if you're at a service center, which is where you need to be in order to legally use psilocybin, it's expensive, isn't it? So not a lot of people, it takes time too. Not a lot of people have all the time in the world. So they might save up a lot of money, figure out how to get this done at a service center, but they might feel like this is their one shot. So I think people can tend to try to just make sure that they get the most bang for their buck, and do the higher dose, feeling like, well, what's the worst that could happen? So with that, I think that'd be a good way to turn it over to Amanda, who has a lot of information to share about real life in a service center in Oregon and how things go, and as particular about how the dosing is done there.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here, and thank you, Jason and Lisa, for having me. So, yeah, I love talking about dosing. This is like one of the things I talk about all of the time with our clients because it is such an important piece of the psychedelic process. It's like deciding on dose and the approach bendable therapy has taken and why we've done this. I'll get into tonight. But first, I want to talk a little bit about like just what is Oregon Psilocybin Services? Like, what is possible here for those of you who don't live in the state, and even if you do, it can be a little bit confusing. So in in 2020, Oregon passed Measure 109, which legalized this whole process. Licensing began in January of 2023, but the first licenses weren't issued until July. And bendable therapy was the first place to hold a session on July 17th. So it took quite a while for us to implement this process. There are many licenses associated with being able to provide legal psilocybin services. So manufacturers, so that's where our mushrooms come from. So our mushrooms are grown at licensed farms, tested at licensed labs. They are administered at a licensed service center under the guidance of a licensed facilitator. And then there's a license or permit for the person who actually administers psilocybin on site. So lots of licenses involved with making this possible. But the great part about the manufacturing side is that all of our product, we know exactly what's in it. So again, grown at a licensed farm, tested at a licensed lab. So we know exactly how much psilocybin is in each package that we provide. So unlike in recreational use, where maybe if you have recreational use background, where you were just guessing with a friend about how many mushrooms or how much this could possibly be, this is a little bit different. So the service model is that psilocybin is not medical or therapeutic, but regulated. So this really is about adult supported use in Oregon. So many service centers, that is the approach that they're taking. Licensed facilitators are not licensed counselors or therapists. They provide support, not treatment. Not to say that some facilitators don't also hold a license in mental health, and we'll get into that a little bit. And Oregon is actually in the process right now proposing to the legislature to protection for dual licenses. So there is hopefully going to be some protection for folks like there is in Colorado. Preparation. So under the Oregon framework, a client must have one preparation meeting. I find that one preparation meeting is often used for the immense amount of paperwork that the Oregon Health Authority, our licensing board, requires for somebody to go through a session. And then there's the administration session or your psilocybin session itself. This is the 6 to 8 hour journey, the journey that someone would go on. And this is on site at the licensed service center under the guidance of that licensed facilitator. And then dosing. So under Oregon law, clients choose their dosage with the facilitator guidance. So this really is a client-driven initiative, which is why at Bendable Therapy, I feel like I spend a lot of time doing education around dosing. Because as Lisa alluded to, a lot of people come in with this misconception that more is better. The very like Western way of looking at things of like, I want to do the most, let's just do this. And that really, in our experience, does not necessarily lead to the outcomes that we were seeking. So, and then integration. A follow-up session is optional for folks under Oregon state law, but encouraged. Next slide. Okay, so at Bendable Therapy, our model is a little bit different. So we take the Oregon, what Oregon legalized, this Oregon framework, and we enhance that. So the Bendable Therapy model is much more robust, and we do an intake and assessment and multiple preparation sessions. Then you have the psilocybin session at the licensed service center, and then multiple integration sessions. So while Oregon, we can't force anybody to come to an integration session. At Bendable, we really do encourage that this is very important for us. So we have one-on-one integration sessions, and then we also have our integration community. So every week we are holding integration circles. We have closed groups, open groups, one-on-one sessions. So integration really is the key, in my opinion, to everything. So I always say the work of therapeutic psilocybin, of really the psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, it's 45% preparation, it's 45% integration, and really 10% is just the psilocybin session itself. And while the psilocybin session itself is the linchpin, it's what we're coming for, it is not the most important piece of achieving long-term positive outcomes. Next slide. And that was just like a brief overview of like our 4-week program. Some of our programs are much longer. So the 3 pillars of a psychedelic journey. So in every psychedelic journey, there are the 3 main components, and that's set, setting, and dose. And as you can see, like talking about dose tonight, it is so important. So set refers to the mindset that you're coming in with. So a lot of this is addressed in our preparation sessions. Setting refers to the place in which you are actually participating in the psilocybin session and making sure that that is a place that you feel comfortable and safe and supported. And then dose. So, and that is what we are going to be talking about tonight. And dose is so important, which is why when choosing a facilitator, having a facilitator who really understands dose and understands your goals and objectives when choosing a dose is so important, because so many folks are coming in again with this misconception that more is better. And oftentimes I like to think about dose of like these really high doses. So at Bendable Therapy, our average range of a dose is 20 to 30 milligrams. And just to put that into a little bit of context for you, is that as Lisa alluded to, there's so many more clinical studies that are going on right now. There's over 200 clinical studies in process right now. So, and in those, the average for depression is about 10 to 25 milligrams. Anxiety and existential distress is about 25 milligrams. Addiction, 20 to 30 milligrams. And then at Bendable, so back up. The clinical trials, they use a synthetic product. So they are using synthetic psilocybin. At Bendable and in all of the Oregon model, we use all natural products. So these are just actual mushrooms. So it's not exactly comparing apples to apples. It's like comparing apples to oranges. And when we talk about dose, it's not necessarily that we're like a very specific, like you have to exactly 25 milligrams. A therapeutic dose is really a range. So for Bendable, our therapeutic range and what we have found is about 20 to 30 milligrams is exactly where people need to be. More than that, and it starts to get what I call energetic. And so I like to liken the metaphor I like to use here is that a therapeutic dose range is what we're trying to do is we're trying to retrieve information from our subconscious. We're trying to bring forward this material. We're trying to enhance the therapeutic benefits of our own knowing, our understanding. This is the work of a psychedelic experience. There's two sides of a coin. One side of the coin is we come for these psychedelic experiences that can lead to profound perception shifts. It can lead to profound insights. And this is all the work of bringing our subconscious material forward and like helping us let go sometimes of stories that no longer serve us, getting a different vantage point on things. And then the other side is the neuroplasticity that is afforded after a high dose of psilocybin. So what we're trying to do is really get into this range where we can access that subconscious material and be able to bring that forward in a way that feels accessible. So I like to think about the metaphor I like to use is like, if you were these really high doses outside of the 30 milligram range can kind of feel like if you were on a super highway and you're trying to get license plates, like everything is going really fast. Like the material can be coming at you really fast. The experiences themselves can be very intense and can lead to a bit of overwhelm. Whereas if we go back down to the therapeutic dose, which is still a very high dose of psilocybin, it is like trying to get a license plate on a regular street where you can actually start to see some of the material go by. You can start to grab at the things and bring that forward, and you can actually like work with the material. So kind of as we think about that, about 85% of our clients at Bendable stay within that 20 to 30 milligrams and are having the same profound effects that, folks are maybe experiencing these mystical experiences or whatnot on higher doses, while also still being able to get all of the therapeutic benefit of being able to work with the material and not feeling that like sense of overwhelm, or sometimes those higher level doses can feel like you're just like white knuckling the experience and trying to endure rather than trying to receive. So I'm sure that people have plenty of questions on that when it's time to open up that. So the only real reasons, next slide. So some things to consider. I'll wait till the next slide comes. Okay, so dosing considerations. So, one back. So dosing considerations. So the therapeutic range of 20 to 30 milligrams, which again is where many of the standard clinical trials are falling, not kind of going up. So where we're at with like, why would somebody who comes to Bendable ever take more psilocybin than the 20 to 30 milligrams? And this is where it gets really interesting around mental health medications. So some of the research does show that folks who are actively on an SSRI, an antidepressant, may experience, about 40% of people experience a blunting effect. So 60% of folks who are on mental health medication will not experience a blunting effect, but about 40% will. And this is because psilocybin works on the 5-HT2A receptor, which is the same receptor that these serotonin mental health medications are also operating on. So psilocybin is a really friendly compound. It's incredibly safe. There is no known toxic level of psilocybin. And when it enters into a system, and if the SSRI is already on board, sometimes psilocybin just exits the room. It's like, okay, you can have the space. I don't need to be here. So about 40% of people will experience that blunting effect. So that is where in Oregon, we have the ability to provide up to 50 milligrams of psilocybin. And for us at Bendable, that is truly reserved for people who are having that experience of a blunting effect. And oftentimes in the session, so how it works in Oregon is you have the opportunity to start at a dose of psilocybin. So for us, we start everybody at 20 milligrams. And then about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour in, you have the option to take a booster dose if this was consented to before you started the session, before you're in an altered state of consciousness. So you'll have the chance to take a booster dose. And at that time, that's where you and the participant and the facilitator can decide together if a booster dose is warranted. So at Bendable, how we work with that is that if a person is on a mental health medication, we're definitely paying attention to that and saying, okay, are you one of those people that is having a blunting effect? Um, and then for some people, that 20 milligrams, they may find that in their experience, they are like at a threshold. And gets really nuanced in how we work with this. But folks who are at a threshold or who may feel like they just can't quite break through into this space. So the facilitator and the participant work together to decide if a touch more psilocybin is warranted. So that's where we would maybe see potentially we would boost somebody to the 30 milligrams, offering them another 10 milligrams, and then evaluate from there. Oftentimes, too, and I would say that this is more common than not, if folks are saying, I may be having a blunting experience. And as I find, I work from an internal family systems lens. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the terms that I'm going to use, I'll explain a little bit. So in the therapeutic world, there's a modality called internal family systems. And in there, we have what's called protectors. So protectors are parts of our psyche that work to keep us safe from pain, harm, or overwhelming emotions. And you can imagine that if somebody is in a psilocybin session and they've got a lot of sensations coming on, some things are happening, that their protectors may step in. And those protectors really can limit the psilocybin experience. So oftentimes, this is the work that we'll do in preparation, is talking to people about their protectors, what to do if that's coming up. So before we offer more psilocybin, we're going to check in with the person and say, do you feel like this is a protector part that's coming up? Can we use some of the tools that we have of like the trusting the process, letting go, being able to release into it? And about half of the time that somebody thinks that they're having a blunting effect, it is actually just them holding on and not wanting to like trust the process and let go. And so through conversation and a bit of dialogue, oftentimes people don't actually need another booster of psilocybin. So they really do stay at that range. And I always say like the age-old wisdom of you can always take more drugs, not less, is so true. And it is so important to remember. So we have a rule at Bendable that we start low and go slow. Like we really want to be checking in with people, because what we don't want to do is send people too far out past the range of the therapeutic range and the therapeutic dose, that they are having an overwhelming experience that doesn't actually lead them to have the insights that would lead to the positive changes in behavior and the positive, changes through what their goals and they were seeking. Next slide. And I think it is really curious when we think about dosing to think about that it isn't. So somebody may say, well, but I'm a 250-pound, 6'5" person. I'm definitely going to need more psilocybin. That's just not true. So dose isn't impacted by weight or gender, but it can be impacted by other curious things, which is again where a facilitator would really be working with somebody to help them understand where they may land in dose and like getting some information so that when they are in the process, kind of evaluating of like, would they potentially need a little bit more than that 20 milligrams? What might that look like? And those things can be different day to day for people. For women, it can be really impacted by cycle. Menopause can impact this. And again, there is really no research around some of these nuances. So it really is so important for you to have a facilitator that you trust, that fully understands where the research is at, and has experiences working with people on deciding what the therapeutic dose will be. And other factors that can impact dose on a day-to-day is, again, like where is somebody at in their cycle? Alcohol and drug use is another huge factor. Have you recently had a cold? Like our immune systems play a big role in this as well. So there's a lot of different factors that can impact like where you will land in that therapeutic space between 20 and 30 milligrams. So as we talked about earlier, the research is just coming. So there's so much that is still left to be known. And is what we do know at Bendable is that we've supported over 200 journeys. Again, 85% of the folks that we have supported have stayed within that 20 to 30 milligrams of a therapeutic dose. And we are in the process of just finalizing our research project. So we went through the process of becoming a fully licensed research site and a field research site. So we were the first field research site in the country. And we just finished enrolling our last participant in the study at the end of February. And we are currently in the process of we follow participants for 4 weeks out. So, and we're using classic mental health scales to measure the efficacy of psilocybin on their reported mental health diagnoses. So we are looking through the bendable therapy to look to describe socio-demographic characteristics, describe the intentions of participants seeking psilocybin services, to measure the effects of psilocybin sessions on participants' reported mood, anxiety, symptoms, and sense of well-being. And determine who is at most risk of acute or lingering adverse events, and then exploratory or qualitative determine participants' subjective benefits of the psilocybin session. So how do people feel after these psilocybin sessions? Did it meet their goals? Did it achieve their mental health objectives? So we will be analyzing that data this spring and presenting our research and publications in June of this year. So we're really looking forward to being able to share with all of you like what we learned from that and being able to look at dose and outcomes and seeing where we land. In a informal survey to past participants, we did find that over 66% of our participants reported that this was a permanently life-changing experience. So, and that led to being able to achieve their goals, their mental health goals that they came in, whether that was treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders, addiction, really the gamut of clients that we see here at Bendable. So more on that. Again, more research is just needed in this space, especially when it comes to therapeutic doses in this new outside of clinical trials. So again, like we are in brand new territory of learning about how psilocybin and the works and the efficacy on mental health conditions.
Thank you, Amanda. That was really great. Appreciate you and Lisa for sharing all of the information, and we'd love to move into the Q&A. So folks, please feel free to enter them into the chat, the questions that you have. After we go through some questions in this manner, we will stop the recording, and then if folks want to ask their questions directly or come off mute, we'll open it up for them at that time. So let me get to some of our questions here.
I noticed, I'll just point out a couple of things from a member. So Paul Anticos from California pointed out a couple of studies that show 79% remission rates in major depressive disorder after 2 12-milligram doses. So kind of a fascinating less is more approach.
Okay, one question here. What's the relationship between having, a mystical experience in a therapeutic focused session? So just more on, potentially the two of those.
Yeah. Well, I could just say about the 2018 study, because they use that mystical experiences scale, they have to start somewhere, right? And you can imagine the questions have to do with things that could have a potentially healing effect, a feeling of oneness with everything, just more positive mood, just feeling of well-being, those kinds of things. So psilocybin, is designated as a breakthrough treatment for major depressive disorder, probably for reasons like that. Meaning, one, the government is acknowledging that there's potential there. Two, more studies are needed, of course. And, how is that going to happen without it being reclassified and taken off of as being a Schedule 1 substance that supposedly has no therapeutic effect and is highly addictive? It is not highly addictive. It's proven to be not highly addictive. But the correlations, you could make all kinds between the feelings of well-being, connectedness, as relating to depression, anxiety, maybe some of those more rigid thinking challenges that people have.
Amanda, do you care to share anything on that, or we can?
Oh, sorry. Lisa, can you repeat the question? I think my audio cut out for a second.
Oh, yeah. I think the question was about the relationship between mystical experiences and improvement in mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like that's what we're one of the scales that we use in our study is the mystical experiences questionnaire. So being able to see if that is correlated to more positive outcomes. And not I from anecdotally, not necessarily. Like, yes, like a mystical experience can be very profound. It can lead to, again, like you were saying, Lisa, like this experience of oneness and connection. And it may not necessarily lead to more positive therapeutic outcomes. It kind of depends on how you take that. And I think like this is where the work of integration becomes so important, because really anything that we do, in the psilocybin session, it can be one fantastical magical day or a wild ride, or like all of the things that a psilocybin experience can be. And it can live in that one day, or we can make meaning with it. We can take that forward and step by step integrate those experiences into our own lives. So if the mystical experience really led a person to have a profound shift in how they perceive themselves or others or their place in the world, then absolutely. Do I think that mystical experience could lead to positive mental health outcomes? 100%. So, and like maybe that was like the mystical experience was a very unique and special experience that somebody had, but maybe that wasn't something that was necessarily directly tied to their mental health goals. Again, like I think this is where the work of integration just becomes so important to say, what was your experience? What does that mean to you? And how can we make meaning from what was derived from that? And what are the practical daily implications of everyday life? Like integration, again, like is such a fast, and it's why at Bendable Therapy we just take this so seriously, is like helping people understand like integration isn't this magic thing where it's like, oh, I'm just going to go integrate this experience. It really is just like the daily work of like, what did I learn? Where, and oftentimes the psilocybin experience like aligns our head and our heart. Like our heart knows something that our head can't quite grasp, or our head knows something that our heart can't accept. So sometimes in the psilocybin session, it's just the alignment of those two being on the same page and being able to be like, I can hold this experience differently, or I was able to forgive, or I was able to let go of, or I just am not tied to this any longer, that like allow someone to truly make those changes. But that change is like the day-to-day work. Like again, like a person still has to move forward. A psilocybin session isn't a magic elixir. It's not magically going to like fix treatment resistant depression. It may truly alleviate symptoms. And this is, again, the twofold piece of a psilocybin session is the psilocybin session itself, which can hold such profound insights, coupled with the high neuroplasticity that's afforded to us after these high doses. And again, like the neuroplasticity piece is really fascinating as well, because like neuroplasticity is our brain brewing all these new neural connections. And we hear this all the time. Michael Pollan talked about this. He talked about how, it's this, our brains kind of get caught into ruts. And like the clinical term for those ruts are canalization. So our brains truly have like these ruts, or like ski tracks that are just well worn. And so the psilocybin session is like the new snow that gets blanketed. And we're like afforded the opportunity to potentially do something differently. And I'll use the example of treatment resist or depression, is like sometimes our depression and ourselves feel so close together that we're almost the same person. And then with the work of psilocybin, it cracks open the door, like a psilocybin session cracks open the window where a person can see that that they are separate from their depression. And then like through work, and again through therapy, that they therapeutic process. And this may look like, there's a bunch of different modalities that are helpful, but so for whatever work has been working for somebody, those tools may become more accessible to start to knit the new neurons together to go in a different direction than they have in the past. And that can lead to such, over time, of the practicing of that using that new neuroplasticity in this way, it can lead to such profound impacts that like 3 to 4, 6 months later, maybe there really is just not the same. There is no longer the diagnosis of treatment resistant depression or whatever it may be. And neuroplasticity isn't magic. Because you are afforded this new neuroplasticity doesn't mean it's going to go in the direction just because it's there. Like it can also reinforce old patterns. It's like really that work of folks. So letting that, when people come to psilocybin services, letting them know like this isn't going to fix everything right away. This is going to be more work. Oftentimes after a psilocybin session, it can feel like a starting line for a new starting line, and a wonderful starting line, because you have material to work with. You have a space to go forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I love how you said that. Just, as psilocybin is known to reduce that those areas of the brain, the default mode network, that tend to be
Hmm.
our kind of autopilot and um, tend to represent our more rigid and routine responses, those areas go down quite a bit. The activity goes down
Hmm.
quite a bit, allowing for more of that landscape to flatten out and then for new responses and connections to be made and knit together. I like how you said that.
Hmm.
And you,
Yeah, it's like the neurons that wire together fire together. So it's like the more that you work to like wire them in the direction that you want to go, to using the tools that you either were given to you through preparation, like when you come to bendable therapy, and most of the folks on our team are dual licensed, like we are mental health professionals in
mm,
addition to facilitators. So it's like, how can you use that time of preparation to be like, where do I want to go? I often ask people like, okay, if we wave a magic wand, what do you want to ask the psilocybin for? And then it's like the work of us together to be like, how are we going to get there? And this isn't a passive experience. Psilocybin sessions require effort, and after they require effort. And I think one of the things that I love about the Michael Pollan like metaphor that many of people have been made aware of is like the ski tracks, and it's like the new snow. But the piece that he leaves out of that metaphor is the snowstorm. In order to get all this new snow, you have to have a snowstorm. And that psilocybin session can often mimic that.
mm,
It can be very intense. It can be very um it can be a lot. And this is why like when we talk about these higher level doses, like when people get past what I consider to be a therapeutic range, the 20 to 30 milligrams, I'm like, we're entering into blizzard territory. And it can be really challenging to make your way through a blizzard. A snowstorm is manageable, but a blizzard can be a bit chaotic, and it can be hard to derive the meaning out of it. But
and
again,
that's an especially apt metaphor for binge.
yeah, we've got the snowstorms here. I know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about when it
yeah.
comes to a snowstorm.
One of the first questions, and Lisa had provided some information, but if either of you have any additional, was what are the possible risks for long-term HPPD, which is hallucinogenic persistent perception disorder, with
Mhm.
psilocybin? Is anything additional besides the article that you would like to share, either of you?
I really look for this is also one of the scales that we are using in our research is to measure for this. And so I'll be very excited to like share what we've learned throughout the process of this. But again, like I don't really have anything to add on that at this time, although it is
Yeah.
a rare occurrence.
That's what it sounds like from the article. The article
Hmm.
is about from 2018, I believe, but it seemed to reference that it's pretty rare and unpredictable occurrence. So this is one of those areas where I think anecdotal and experiential data is going to help fill that in,
Hmm.
and it's going to be a lot harder to get more studies about that.
Hmm.
How long that
Yeah.
lasts, what's the risks of that happening. It might just be worth, independent research on that particular if you have that concern.
And one of the goals of
Yes.
this entire training was to emphasize for folks that are really looking for a lot of the science and data is that we're not there yet because we're still in the infancy, and there was a big disruption when there was studies going on in the 50s and 60s, so that we have to rely on a lot of information like what Amanda's doing with bendable therapy, and a lot of this anecdotal, and just the experience of how long the substance has been used for thousands and thousands of years, that we need to weigh that in, or that should be considered, that you might not find the details that you really want in the materials. Um, so another question was around, there's appreciation for you addressing the menstrual and menopausal challenges with dosages, and if you know of any studies currently being done with this focus, and then kind of following up of if you share any experiential knowledge around hormonal influences to psilocybin.
Mm. Just anecdotally,
If
the only one that I'm aware of is ongoing in Colorado. So as far as I'm concerned.
I have one paper that was published, but I don't want to reference it right now because I don't want to get anything wrong. But if you send me an email, if whoever asked that question just sends me an email, which is in the chat, I will happily send you everything that I do have, which everything is just one, it's just one paper. Um, and again, like this is where we're at, right? Like it is just like, oh, do you have any information about this? And it's like, yes, like I get asked a lot of like about medication tapers and what should I do? And it's like, we are not medical providers, that you should always discuss that with your team. And I can provide you with as much information as I possibly can of knowing that, we're trying to help people make an informed decision. But oftentimes, like the information, like, here, we have this one or two journal articles that have been published, or here's this one study that was done. And Lisa, to your point, like sometimes those
Mm.
study designs are really interesting. You're like, oh, it was 12 white guys who had no mental health issues. Who I'm so curious. I can't even believe they found 12 people that didn't have any mental health conditions in their family. Like, what, who are you? Right. Like, that's so, I mean, I think like these studies can be, some of the studies really are limiting in their research design. And just, again, why we're excited about the research at Bendable is like 100 participants from varying backgrounds with multiple, with very diverse backgrounds. We'll go with that. So excited to kind of see where we might find additional information for all of us.
Okay. And somebody had made a comment about, having severe depression and anxiety and antidepressants for many, many years, and all of this is very, very common from, from different avenues of people seeing, facilitators above ground and below ground, and try to up to 4 grams with no effect. And I think this throws in one of the options of or questions around strains too, because and that's why
Yep.
OPS and the healing centers in Colorado work around the analate, because a dry mushroom is not the same as the weight of psilocybin or psilocybin that's in there. So there's a lot of variables that could be a part of that. Is there anything else either of you would like to chime in about that, of just kind of dosage or strains, and for people that might be on antidepressants that could take those larger amounts?
Like, I agree with you. It might be a question of strain, and this is one of those areas where we just do not know, and more experimentation, honestly, is needed. I mean, I could personally say I've had an experience with 4 grams and not much of a result, and I think it was dependent on the strain, but I don't know for sure. So I think it can vary quite a bit. Amanda mentioned a lot of different variables, whether you've been sick, whether you've, I don't know, taken a cold medication, whether you're, the age, hormones, those kinds of things can all play into it. Whether there's a blocking belief or blocking mechanism internally that could just be keeping you safe, from something like a potentially risky, adventure as taking a bunch of psilocybin. So, I think, yeah, it could just depend. And then just as far as whether other medications, like particular SSRIs, or I think CBD was mentioned in the comments as well. I don't I don't know specifically, but there's locally there's at least two psychiatrists who specialize in providing, both. There's a medical doctor actually who will do, I think it's for something like $250 flat fee. He'll review your medical information and try to kind of get you a little bit of, I don't know, more comfort in whether you can physically go forward with psilocybin, and whether maybe your medications could interfere. Um, and so I think consulting a psychiatrist or a pharmacist, and there's at least two organizations that we know of, that are psychedelic pharmacy related. And if you just want to let us know that you're interested in that kind of information, we can provide those names to you.
Probably the same resources you have, Lisa, but I think it is really interesting. Like psilocybin, again, like it is just such a safe compound. So and it doesn't, it oftentimes the only medication that you cannot be on is lithium. And outside of that, there is a like it just it's a lot of conversation. So sometimes like your facilitator will be able, at least at Bendable Therapy, we are very knowledgeable about some of these interactions, can like point you in the right direction and point you to folks who can give you that advice. And there are a lot of doctors or psychiatrists who maybe won't, even if they have an opinion, they won't offer it because this is still a Schedule One illegal drug. So every time that we offer advice or support from like that medical lens, there is some there is a case to be made that you're putting into jeopardy your license. So there are some physicians and psychiatrists who just absolutely won't touch the topic because they're, concerned about is that an ethical violation? Is this practicing outside of their scope? There is not a lot of information for medical providers that like to understand this modality. So a lot of folks are just like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this. So definitely like working with a facility or a treatment team, a facilitator who can help you find folks who do have that knowledge and can help you make those decisions.
And I put in the chat the email first and then the name, Dr. Michael Halty, who's a licensed facilitator and also works out of Vital Reset out in Hood River, another awesome service center. And he is a medical doctor and does consults, very knowledgeable, very affordable. He's definitely someone I'd recommend, particularly if you're interested in using organ psilocybin services or one of the regulated models. And Spirit Pharmacist is a very well known and reputable online pharmacist who specifically focuses in psychedelics. He does consults as well. Question, been doing at-home ketamine via Mind Bloom, and I'm going to be doing a psilocybin session soon. How long a time frame should I have not doing that at home, the home ketamine before getting ready for psilocybin, and then how long of no alcohol or substances?
Yeah. So the alcohol and substances question, I mean, this is really nuanced and like something that you would want to talk to, again, a skilled facilitator to have that conversation or someone who can, because it depends. Like it really depends on like what is your alcohol use at? Is this so I'd have a lot more questions, but typically is what we say is that no alcohol for 24 hours. And if this is a substance use disorder diagnosis and we're still in active use, that's going to be a different conversation. Um, yeah. So just I'll leave it at that. Lisa, anything?
Yeah, I think maybe how fast ketamine is metabolized could be an interesting way to approach that. I don't think that, as far as I know, ketamine doesn't have much interaction with other substances, and that's why it can be the go-to choice, other than being legal, can be the go-to choice for people who are on SSRIs or like medications, because there will not be a blocking effect there with that. And then somebody mentioned also, it's a little bit on topic with GLP-1s or what is that called? The weight loss injection, GLP-1s. We did hear from, I think it was Jenna Louie, who's over at Fractal Soul, the executive director there, talked about just anecdotally something that yes, there could be a very significant delay that they've experienced, that there was a very significant delay with somebody taking GLP-1s. And I have no idea what their schedule was when they last took it, because my understanding of some of those is that you take an injection weekly. But I can't speak to that as far as medically at all. So that's, again, we'd want to refer you to somebody who has that medical knowledge.
Hopefully this could be a quick question, probably geared more towards Amanda, around the process and the cost, and assuming that would be for a session at Bendable through OPS. So variable costs, out there, but anything you'd like to share?
So I think like what I can speak to our process at Bendable. So typically is what we have folks do is come in, fill out an application, and then we schedule like a first initial intake meeting, which is virtual, where we just take a deep dive in learning about your goals, hopes, intentions, and expectations, learning about what support we made. And so really using that time so that we can develop a robust program that's specifically tailored for you. And this involves like providing you with the resources that you need, information, like helping you make the best informed decision possible about moving forward, and like getting to know you and what your like just your unique set of needs are. And then we also use that to try to match you with the appropriate facilitator from our team. So again, just like when you pick a therapist, or it's not everybody is the right fit for everyone. So what we try to do is get to know you and like your goals, and then align you with the right person from our team. again, everyone from our team holds a dual license for the most part. So, but everyone also has their specialties. So trying to get you to the person that may be the best fit. And then from there, we start on like the multiple preparation. And so we always tell people that typically from like application, if you're just like ready to go, it's going to be about 4 to 6 weeks before you actually get to your dosing session. And that's really intentional. It is so that we can slow this process down, so that we can resource you, so that we can do some psychoeducation, so that we can work with you to like make sure that when you get to that psilocybin session, you are feeling prepared, safe, and that we've addressed, really done some work to start to get the psychedelic assisted therapy part of this, like to really get you ready for this session. And then you have your psychedelic session at the licensed service center, and then you continue on to integration. So again, the back half, the other 45% of the project. So that's how our program works. We are a nonprofit, so we are for our services of everything that we include, sometimes we offer groups at lower rates, and these are 4-person groups, so we like to keep them small, and they're usually centered around a theme. So sometimes we'll have like grief and loss, or an addiction group, or treatment resistant depression, or so we have these different groups with themes, so folks can join those. And again, that can be psilocybin, Western world. We're the only people who do this one-on-one. This is typically always done in groups. So groups for me are really special. It's typically, I spend most of my time as the facilitator working on the groups, because they just mean a lot to me. And I really like bringing people into community and partnership. So yeah, so we have our group rates, and then our individual rates, and then we are a nonprofit. So we do a lot of work around equity, offering scholarships to folks who cannot afford it. So, and that is all dependent on funding. But we've provided over $250,000 in scholarships over the last 2 years. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
amazing. And thank you for all that work. And
Yeah.
if you are, looking, there are, a lot of different centers out there, and many of them have different, approaches. And so really learning about one service center is not going to be the same as what another one is. And as Amanda was saying, fit is super important. So really check out your facilitators, check out the service centers, and learn what makes it unique, because that is so important on there. And briefly, we touch, quickly on the CBD and psilocybin. I'm not aware of anything, really having an impact, on it. Amanda, Lisa.
No, and I think for us, like we're just really, we ask people to refrain for 24 hours at the very least, more if possible, from all drugs, and that includes caffeine. So, we oftentimes forget about like the very like serious plant medicine that most people use every day, which is caffeine and coffee. So we ask people to try if they can. And again, we don't want to send people into withdrawal, so we work with people on that. But yeah, we usually tell people like 24 hours at least. And again, this is really going to be dependent on the person, which is why at Bendable we do really emphasize like these robust therapeutic programs, and less of what building on the Oregon model and making it a full program that's tailored to meet your individual needs.
Thank you.
And then
Jason, I just in the interest of time, I've noticed that there's a couple of questions, and then maybe we can stop the recording and we can just hang out a little bit if whoever's available to hang out. I'm happy to do that. I just wanted to just address, there was a couple about ego dissolution and mystical experiences. I did post the link for the mystical experiences questionnaire that I think could answer some of that, as far as requiring ego dissolution for a more positive therapeutic outcome. I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of anything that shows that that's a prerequisite.
Yeah, anything else with that? Just going through, yeah, we had ego dissolutions, just got, experience around clients who wanted to repeat their trips. And, I think that's
how often?
very, very great to, within, we always sort of trying to promote that, your therapeutic journey could be is very different than your session journey. So your therapeutic journey could have multiple sessions and different modalities in there. And anything else you'd like to share around that?
How often people tend to repeat their sessions at a service
Yes.
center?
Yes, it is for people who have come from multiple sessions. So we sometimes offer programs that do have 2 sessions. This has typically been for our folks who maybe are coming in with acute cases of we do a lot of work with veterans. So oftentimes our veteran clients with who have complex PTSD will have 2 sessions that are really close together. Also, we've seen some benefit from clients who have severe or acute OCD, who coming for multiple sessions has been helpful. And that really is about 10% of the clients that we see. So for folks who, again, even with treatment resistant diagnoses, 1 session is typically plenty for what people are trying to address. And we typically suggest that for our, a standard therapeutic experience that you wait 6 months between sessions, because integration is so important. Like we don't want to bypass like the work, right? Like psilocybin isn't the work. The medicine isn't the answer. The answer is our work that we put into this. So like the integrating of that experience and typically I say 6 months is like a minimum, but when you've really started to like unpack some of the insights from your first session. And then at that point, like, let's have a conversation and evaluate if this is right for you. And I know that again, like when people come to a service center, so a little over 60% of our clients have had experience with psychedelics in their past. And this could be ketamine assisted therapy. This could be recreational use in their 20s and they're now in their 60s, so it can be really all over the place. But I always tell people too, like, you're coming into relationship with psilocybin. So I am not the keeper of psilocybin. I have a regulated service center and I operate in the regulated framework. And I think that is a very valuable, vehicle for accessing psilocybin services, especially for those who are maybe psychedelically naive or haven't had a lot of experience in this space. Absolutely. Having a trusted and trained facilitator who can help support you through this process is so crucial. And like people may be choosing to have these experiences in other ways after they have this initial experience.
Point.
Great. So I'd really like to thank everybody for attending, and here in a second we will transition over to just an open Q&A and we'll stop the recording. Really appreciate everybody taking the time today, and if you are watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe. We have our next training in this series on part 3 will be on the therapeutic dose. We've been talking, our first training was on microdosing, really good training available on our YouTube channel. This one on heroic dose, and then we'll be leading into what's the therapeutic dose and what are the benefits and all of that. So thank you everyone for attending. If you'd like to stay, please do so, and we'll open it up.